Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 Midnight News coming to you live from the capital Algiers, and these are tonight's top stories. An American delegation visited Western Sahara as part of efforts to relaunch the peace process between the two parties to the conflict and demands for international intervention to put an end to the occupation's crimes against the Sahrawis. In Niger, ECOWAS denies the proposal for 9 months transitional period to resolve the crisis, and the United Nations calls for opening a humanitarian corridor to organize the return of migrants. And as top Ukrainian officials stated that drone strikes on Russian soil would grow, Russia's defense ministry announced it had destroyed 281 Ukrainian drones in the previous week, including 29 over Russia's western regions. As Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy proposed the potential reintroduction of nuclear power to reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels, President Kasim Tokayev announced referendum on the construction of nuclear power plants in the country. Hello again and welcome. The occupation forces in Palestine have brutally killed a Palestinian young man in the West Bank. Palestinian Health Ministry said that the 36-year-old victim had been critically injured in the head by a live ammunition fired by occupation forces. The incident happened when the Zionist forces raided into the town of Aqaba, causing clashes to break out. Now, in the African continent, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for North Africa has begun a visit to Western Sahara, reaffirming full U.S. support for the UN political process for Western Sahara. The visit includes political discussions with the Sahrawis leaders and meetings with a group of women and young people, in addition to visits at the level of certain structures. President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Brahim Ghali, will receive the U.S. delegation in audience at the end of his visit. The same matter, the Sahrawi human rights activists are urgently calling on the international community to stop the Moroccan occupation's continued abuses in Western Sahara, which include serious violations of human rights and freedoms guaranteed by international law.
The Moroccan occupation in Western Sahara persists in denying the Sahrawi people their basic rights, aiming to pressure them into abandoning their legitimate right to self-determination and independence. Sahrawi human rights activists are urging the international community to take swift actions to compel the Moroccan government to halt these violations, which run counter the principles established by the United Nations and international agreements.
We note with great concern the continued Moroccan violations of all rights or freedoms, such as the right to assembly and organization, the right to peaceful demonstration, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, and the establishment of associations, some of which were closed by force.
In recent statements, the Sahrawi Association of Victims of Serious Human Rights Violations has criticized the Moroccan occupation's ongoing restrictions on observer delegations and international media access to the region.
The association recalls the continuation of the Moroccan state, preventing its new office from registering and operating, in addition to closing the area and preventing delegations of observers and the international press from visiting it, and the continuation of arbitrary detention, torture, preparing reports, fabricating charges, and sham trials.
To address the oppression and injustice faced by the Sahrawis in the occupied territories, the Sahrawi Assembly has proposed creating an independent international mechanism in addition to the MINURSO mission. This new body would be responsible for gathering facts and monitoring the human rights situation in the occupied cities. The ongoing violations by the occupation forces in Sahrawi cities emphasize the clear distinction between Western Sahara and Morocco as separate entities, regardless of Maghzen's regime's attempts to present them as a single historical entity.
Tunisian Interior Minister Kamal Al-Fiki discussed the issue of irregular migration with his Italian counterpart in a phone call. They reviewed cooperation relations and partnership programs between the two countries, particularly in the areas of immigration and organized crimes. Both ministers agreed to continue exchanging information to uncover those involved in facilitating the transit of African migrants from sub-Saharan countries through Tunisia to Europe. Efforts to support the capabilities of Tunisian security units in combating human trafficking networks and irregular migration activities were also discussed during the call. In a related matter, Deputy Prime Minister and Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani urged the European Union to invest in Tunisia in order to support its stability and stop the flow of illegal immigration. Tajani stressed during his participation in a meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Toledo, Spain, the need for the European Union to invest in Tunisia and implement the Memorandum of Understanding between the two sides to stop illegal immigration.
We need to work for the stability of Tunisia. We need to invest more.
The European Union should contribute to Tunisia's stability through investing in this country and implementing the Memorandum of Understanding to curb illegal immigration. I believe that it's important to work with Tunisia. As for Italy, the Memorandum of Understanding was a good option from the European Union. The meeting of Saïd, van der Leyen, Rutte and Meloni was very positive. We have to work towards the country's stability and invest more money to implement the agreement and stop illegal immigration.
The agreement for stopping illegal migration.
The UN Migration Agency IOM stressed on Friday the need to set up a humanitarian corridor to enable safe, dignified and voluntary return of migrants stranded in Niger to their countries of origin and facilitate the delivery of aid to areas affected by the conflict. The IOM Regional Director for West and Central Africa, Chris Gascon, said in a press briefing at the United Nations office in Geneva that Niger hosts more than 10,700 forced refugees, pointing out that most of the migrants residing in the transit centers affiliated with the International Organization for Migration throughout the country are from West African countries.
We are appealing for resources to make sure that we can continue providing these essential services to these stranded migrants. In this vein as well, IOM is advocating for the establishment of a humanitarian corridor so that we can return people to their countries of origin. This time there are no possibilities for us to organize charter flights, and consequently people will remain there for weeks and months.
ECOWAS refuted the reports claiming its president, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, proposed a 9-month transitional period to return to democracy in Niger. The organization stated that the report was fabricated and should be considered fake news. ECOWAS emphasized its clear demand for an immediate return to constitutional order in Niger, the release of President Mohamed Bazoum, and the restoration of the position media outlets had attributed a statement to Tinubu suggesting a transitional period similar to what happened in Nigeria in 1990 after a military coup. In the same country, authorities in Niger have announced the suspension of activities by international organizations, UN agencies, and local non-governmental organizations in areas of military operations. The Nigerian Ministry of Interior, part of the government formed by the Military Council, stated that it had temporarily frozen all activities and movements of national and international non-governmental organizations and United Nations agencies in these regions. The decision comes in response to the security situation and the operational commitment of Nigerian armed forces. Also, the White House said that the U.S. is closely following the situation in Gabon and Niger and is deeply concerned about the military's power seizure in these two countries. The White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said that U.S. administration is seeking, along with its partners on the African continent, applicable diplomatic solutions. Now, Gabon's main opposition group, Alternance 2023, which says it is the rightful winner of Saturday's election, urged the international community on Friday to encourage the military to hand power back to the civilians. Spokesperson of the Alternance 2023 said that the opposition group hopes that the international community will stand up in favor of the republic and democratic order in Gabon. Citizens across the African continent are grappling with the cost of living crisis due to the coups, as the continent has experienced 7 coups since August 2020, before the one perpetrated on Wednesday in Gabon. More in this report.
Since the latest coup in Gabon, civilians in neighboring areas are suffering, specifically in Cameroon, where an already full-blown crisis has worsened due to the ongoing crisis in Gabon that has gone beyond the social aspect to negatively affect the economic and security conditions. Cameroonians are worried about their threatened livelihoods. Dozens of trucks, taxis and other vehicles were stranded at Cameroon's border with Gabon, without having any idea of when the border might reopen, after military leaders overthrew the president and closed their borders indefinitely.
I'm really crammed in here. Since the border is closed here, we really feel that things aren't going well. You see our cars parked here. We can't even work because the crossings are closed. It's really not going well. People are calling for the border to be opened up.
Markets and trade activities came to a halt at Cameroonian towns that border Gabon. Residents in border towns fear the prolonged closures of borders could harm local markets, where Gabonese citizens make up a sizable portion of customers.
We live in partnership with our Gabonese brothers and they come here regularly. But when they have a little problem like that, especially at the borders, we really feel how activities are slowed down. So, for us to try to make progress, the borders really need to be open. Because if things don't work like that, we are normally on the spot, not working. The cars are parked.
The African continent is experiencing a succession of coups in several countries as a response to what is called French Africa, representing the former colonies of this European country, which keeps them linked to it both politically and economically. This has caused public discontent and poverty among Africans, and due to that, citizens decided to take to the streets to break free from France's influence and bringing about a change.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated that he had written to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and put forward a set of specific proposals on reviving the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Guterres said that UN proposals could form the basis for resumption of the Black Sea grain export deal, but he did not reveal the details of proposals. He also mentioned that UN had proposed specific measures to allow Russian grain and fertilizers to enter the global market.
We took into concern the Russian requests, and I believe we presented a proposal that could be the basis for a renewal, but a renewal that must be stable. I mean, we cannot have a Black Sea initiative that moves from crisis to crisis, from suspension to suspension. We need to have something that works and that works to the benefit of everybody.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday that He would hold talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Monday in the Russian Black Sea resort of Sochi. Reports suggest that the two leaders would primarily discuss Black Sea grain exports and the Black Sea grain deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations in 2022 that ended after Russia withdrew last July. Also, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said he will soon hold a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. The last time the two leaders met was last March in Moscow. Both the Russian and the Chinese presidents have already indicated of an era of much closer ties between Russia and China. The meeting is expected to further strengthen the Sino-Russian relations.
Soon enough, we will have some events and there will be a meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Chinese President Xi calls me his friend, and I'm happy to call him my friend, because this is a man who personally does a lot for the development of Russian-Chinese relations and competition in different areas. We'll surely discuss what can be done in the direction of developing humanitarian contacts.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated earlier that he told United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres that online meetings held on Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky peace formula in August were unacceptable. Lavrov also said that Russia would also block the final declaration of this month's G20 summit, and thus it reflects Moscow's position on Ukraine and other crises, leaving participants to issue a non-binding or partial communique.
Going back to these peace processes, the Zelensky formula, we have sent our corresponding assessments and corresponding questions to everyone who was invited, including, as I said, to representatives of the United Nations, and we will not leave it at that. There will not be a general declaration on behalf of all members of G20 that does not reflect our position. There is an option when the presidency, seeing irreconcilable differences for one reason or another, in this case, because of the whims of the West, simply accepts and issues a communique that does not bind any country to what is written there. It's not going to be very nice, but it's not our choice.
On Friday, a top Ukrainian official stated that drone strikes on Russian soil would grow, and that a recent spate of such operations demonstrated that the war in Ukraine was rapidly transferring to Russia. In an interview with Reuters, presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak said Ukraine has increased its strikes on occupied territories, but he separated Kiev from Russian actions, which he said were carried out by Asians or Russian followers within Russia. As the frequency of the strikes has grown, Kiev has emphasized its work in building long-range strike weapons to correct a capability mismatch that has allowed Russia to pound sites in Ukraine from hundreds of kilometers away without Kiev being able to reply in like.
First of all, Ukrainian attacks take place on its occupied territories. The number have increased. The number is high, especially on the Crimean Peninsula. Concerning attacks on the Russian Federation, there is an increasing number of attacks by unidentified drones launched from the territory of the Russian Federation. And the number of these attacks will increase, because this is the stage of the war when hostilities are gradually being transferred to the territory of the Russian Federation.
On the other side, Russia's defense ministry announced on Friday that it had destroyed 281 Ukrainian drones in the previous week, including 29 over Russia's western regions, revealing that the scope of the drone war presently ranging between Russia and Ukraine. Russia, for its part, has frequently bombarded Ukraine with the waves of one-way drones carrying explosive payloads, which are significantly less expensive than missiles and can be difficult and costly to detect by air defense systems.
In the period from August 25th to September 1st, Russia's armed forces carried out 5 group strikes with high-precision long-range air and sea-based weapons against enemy control points, radio and electronic intelligence centers, its port infrastructure facilities, storage sites for ammunition and Western weapons, as well as airfields. As a result of the strikes, control of the Ukrainian Armed Forces strategic radio jamming system was disrupted. Workshops for assembling uncrewed boats used by the Kiev regime for terrorist acts, air defense systems, multiple launch rocket systems, armored vehicles, as well as Western-made aviation weapons were destroyed.
Spokesman for the Chinese presidency said that seeking cooperation with the United States is a necessary rather than a choice for China. Mr. Wang said that currently, every time the United States talks about its relations with China, it mentions competition, as China-US relations are mainly about or even all about competition.
Competition is inevitably mentioned whenever it comes to the topic of China-US relations in the United States now, as if competition has become an overwhelming issue in the bilateral relations, or even the whole of the issues. China's attitude and position are clear. Competition should be conducive to mutual promotion and common improvement, and should be in line with the common interests and expectations of both sides and the international community, instead of tripping the other side up by hook or by crook, and resorting to every conceivable means in an attempt to pull the other side down.
The U.S. congressional delegation in Stockholm has pledged strong support to Sweden's accession to NATO amid conflict in Ukraine, following Swedish Foreign Minister's statement that he is still hopeful Turkey will ratify Sweden's plan to join NATO. This October, the House for Foreign Affairs chairman said that expected the accession to take place in October once Turkey have ratified the application.
For Turkey to begin the ratification? We're very much looking forward to the ascension of Sweden into NATO. Formally, we anticipate by October. I can tell you that myself and Ranking Member Meeks have put a lot of pressure on Turkey to come to the terms of this agreement through various levers that we have, and we're very delighted to see that happen.
Kazakhstan will hold a referendum to decide whether to build its first nuclear power plant, as President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said on Friday, adding that the date would be decided later. The Central Asian nation's government has long discussed the idea, citing the need for new power generation capacity, but some activists oppose the project because of safety concerns and Kazakhstan's history as home to the Soviet-operated semi-nuclear weapons testing ground.
The decision to build or not to build a nuclear power plant is an extremely important issue concerning the future of our country. Therefore, I propose to submit it to a national referendum. We will decide on specific dates later.
Japan has imposed additional sanctions on North Korea after its attempts to launch projectiles using ballistic missiles technology. North Korea failed to launch a military reconnaissance satellite last week and also test-fired a ballistic missile 2 days ago.
In line with the US and South Korea, the cabinet agreed in today's meeting to impose sanctions against 3 organizations and 4 individuals involved in nuclear and missile development, which is prohibited under the Security Council resolutions relating to North Africa, as a further measures against North Korea to tackle issues surrounding abductions, nuclear and missiles.
A group of 30 calligraphers from across Iraq each wrote a section of Quran, showcasing the manuscripts at an exhibition in Baghdad as a response to the repeated discretion of the Holy Book of Islam, the Quran.
The Quran is our approach. It is the title of this mobile exhibition in Baghdad that serves as a response to the recent repeated desecrations of the Holy Quran in the name of freedom of speech. A group of 30 Iraqi calligraphers each wrote a section of the Quran, finishing the craft in 10 weeks, as a creative response to the despicable act of publicly burning Quran.
We are 30 calligraphers from the Iraqi Calligraphers Association. Each of us wrote a chapter of the Holy Quran. Praise be to God. We have completed its 30 chapters. This represents a civilized response to all those who discredited and mistreated the Holy Quran.
Arabic calligraphy, which is a historic form of art in Iraq and a prime element of Islamic art, served as a civilized rhetoric against the provocative practices of anti-Islam activists in Europe and elsewhere.
This exhibition serves as a civilized response to the attacks that targeted the Holy Quran in some European countries. We say to them that this is the essence of Islam. This is the revered Quran, which was revealed to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It embodies the miracle of Islam, and we must consistently uphold its paramount value.
The Iraqi government will reproduce this work in its original size and distribute copies of Quran to both local and international libraries as a goodwill gesture.
And with this, we reach the end of our news bulletin. Thank you ever so much for taking part with us. For more updates, come follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, take care of yourself and good night.